morning. Don Marquis once said, if you make people think they're thinking, they'll love you. If you make them really think, they'll hate you. So I'm going to try for the latter and try not to hate me if I succeed. The mission of the Thunderbolts group, at least as we set it up 10 or 11 years ago, was to reconstruct the catastrophic past of our geophysical world and our predecessors, and bring this knowledge into the public domain because it has been forgotten, lost, suppressed, whatever. The purpose, of course, is to better understand the religious, psychological, cultural, physical environment in which we find ourselves, which, need I mention, is pretty confusing, pretty chaotic. 100,000 plus different religions out there in the world. We're all aware of the strife and confusion going on in our geopolitical world of today. The major premise here is that in the not too distant past, humans experienced the breakup of the Saturnian configuration, ending in the Great Catastrophe, the end of the end phase of the Golden Age, and then also a later series of lesser but still globally devastating catastrophes. The minor premise is that the breakup of this alignment was so extensive that it involved the transfer of the Earth away from the ancient, better sun, Saturn, to an eventually circularized orbit around our current sun in a reorganized solar system. Taken as a whole, these catastrophes changed not only the surface of the Earth, its environment, and its ecology, but a lot of things about mankind and its culture. The minor premise, again, is this series of catastrophes had an extensive, profound effect upon the human race in every aspect of our thinking, psychology, culture, communication, and behavior. Ancient writing attests to belief of ancients that antediluvian conditions had been paradisiacal in some sense. Yet there is an obvious conflict in evidence for this issue. It's hard to picture any of Earth's carnivores ever living on a veggie diet. There is evidence of Cro-Magnon having exterminated the Neanderthal and most other hominids, and it is known that there was warfare in late Neolithic times. The context for consideration here as well is that the end of the Golden Age inaugurated major changes for mankind that we have taken for granted as always having been in existence. Geologists, paleontologists report that there have been 7 extinctions, 5 major at least, of animal life that have resulted in 99.9% of all known species having been lost, and with multiple ice ages. A working conclusion is that the end of the Golden Age inaugurated major changes for mankind that we have taken for granted as always having been in existence again. So, what I'm proposing is that there is a huge catastrophic cultural carry forward that we're largely unaware of. And we are largely unaware of why we're doing things that we're doing today. So this involves possible effects, factors, and mechanisms, implications, questions, probabilities. So I'm going to try to paint a picture in your mind through suggestions, questions, conjectures, and some claims. This is the brief list of categories and possible sub-aspects. There are, of course, environmental, ecological factors, physiological factors, psychological, philosophical, esoteric, socio-political, and finally, religious, cultural factors. So, starting right in. Major change in an otherwise benign or benevolent life support environment. Our life support environment now is not benign or benevolent. We have to scramble, and we have used an ongoing upward march of technology to ameliorate the conditions on Earth as we find it, and to make our lives more comfortable and better sustained. Maybe one of the most significant factors is that we've undergone an oppressive gravitational force change, probably by a factor of 4. Exposure to new and dangerous climatic and seasonal temperature changes. Exposure to hitherto unencountered toxins. Maybe a contamination or widespread of certain toxic metals like cadmium or whatever. Exposure to hitherto unencountered radiation mix. Exposure to hitherto unencountered electrical field levels. Animal extinctions, species changes, plant extinctions and changes, shift from a perennial food source supply to seasonal food crops. That takes a learning curve. That doesn't happen smoothly. Significant overall increase in stress on living structures. Reduction in size limits of most creatures due to increased gravity. Some changes in body chemistry. Significant increase in fertility rate tied to the new lunar cycle, evidently. Significant increase in birth defects and malformed human aspects. Significant decrease in sex drive. I'm not sure which it is, but you can pick your own flavor there. Significant reduction in availability and consumption of a balanced, healthy diet. Any major disruption in the ecology and overnight development of new species would indicate a new dietary learning curve. Possible increased physiological and sexual maturation rate. We've seen an increase in the maturation rate or the sexual development rate just in the time that the United States has been in existence. Reduction in human lifespan. Major factor number 3, major change in attitude toward life and its value. The population was no doubt decimated with the attendant depression of the survivors. today's ratio of maturity to lifespan is down to 1 to 4 from what? 1 to 15 or 1 to 100? We really don't know what the original lifespan of human beings was during the Golden Age. Significant increase and exposure to violent premature death, including increased child mortality, the loss of or a significant reduction in a sense of security, a heightened sense of personal, familial, and societal vulnerability. Don't ask me what the difference between those last two are, but the sudden extreme transition from a life of leisure and hedonism to survival struggle, the sudden rise in use of escape mechanism, chemical agents, alcohol, other substances, the sudden rise in use of escape mechanism focus, activity for distraction, significant increase in the value of an indulgence in risk-taking, societal value changes such as practical ability over artistic ability. Major factor number 4, the blunting, stunting of the development of the humane virtues such as kindness, compassion, empathy, etc. An increase in the short-circuiting of rationality, logic, and reason. A general increase in the valuation of competitiveness all the way to military capability. A general decrease in the valuation of sensitivity, restraint, peaceful amelioration. The development of the, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem mentality. The increase of the valuation of human life in terms of productivity. Five, the overwhelming sense of loss and ensuing depression for the survivors. Probably an initially huge depression rate, probably an initially huge suicide rate. There's always survivor guilt. I'm going to suggest, as the author of, what was the book? I think Maccabee wrote The Sacred Executioner, great book. The inauguration of mercy killing, the inauguration of human sacrifice, which maybe morphed from assisted suicide and mercy killing. Development of desperate or psychotic systems of thinking behavior to regain paradise. 6, in an environment of ordeal and harsh survival, the development of patriarchy from the now greater valuation of the male characteristics. Probably an initial and ongoing warfare between families, tribes, or cultures over inadequate resources in a post-catastrophic world. Development of male domination, development of greater social segregation of the sexes, domination of male developed religion, mythology, and suppression of the female. When everybody's sitting around the campfire, there's a kind of a natural segregation takes place, and the males tell their version of what happened, and the females tell theirs. So the development of his story and her story. Well, does that suggest the fundamental root of the word history? Which one of these two competing visions of what happened and why do you think prevailed? And which one do you think got suppressed? Change in relationship rationale. Significant increase in the valuation of physical attributes. Significant increase in the valuation of provider ability. Significant increase in the valuation of status based on material wealth. Significant increase in the valuation of leadership capability. If there's nothing pressing to do, nowhere urgent to go, and everybody's having a good time, you don't need a lot of leadership. Number 8, a radical shift in artistic subject emphasis. Take note of the inexplicable change from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic art forms and expressions. Number 9, development of addiction to drama. I won't dignify it by calling it drama. It should be called drama. The struggle between good and evil. The eventual development of the warrior-hero motif and the hero syndrome. Mix in the ongoing meaninglessness of dying and death. Read Ernest Becker's Pulitzer Prize-winning The Denial of Death. Number 11, the continuous, incessant ego problem causing corrosion of our psyches. From A, the human condition of never receiving everything that we legitimately want and need to sustain and enhance our lives. B, the message of relentless indifference from the experience of a harsh material and psychological reality because we are all under natural law and it never affirms our value or worth. We never get to abrogate or violate it. When you step over the edge of the cliff, the law of gravity never says to you, oh, well, you're such a great, wonderful person, I'm going to soften your landing. Doesn't happen, ever. So, a major implication. Taken as a whole, the catastrophes with the resultant disrupted and harsher environment and wounded ecology could have been a filter that selectively favored the survival of those humans that were more competitive and combative, less sensitive, less virtuous, less contemplative, less spiritually inclined. New counterproductive ideas that may have gotten started and adopted. Development of a concept that God became angry with the human race. Development of the concept that God decided to punish and or cleanse us severely with violent global genocidal or homicidal catastrophes. By the way, God to the ancient people was represented by that huge glowing orb in the sky, Saturn. That was the visible presence of God, generally conceived. C, the development of legalism, the idea that man was meant to live under and obey invasive moral law versus that should be external and eternal inspirational principles. Development of the idea of punishment as the proper response to unacceptable behavior. development of, quote, God placating guilt and fear-based religions. 13, the expression of violence toward mankind from Sky God. New and increased adoption of outlandish, violent, capricious creator concepts, along with rejection, probably, of more sensible ones. An explosion of anthropomorphic planet god mythologies, resulting in the pantheon and other religious god-planet hierarchies. An explosion of confusion, mysticism, and superstition. The loss or breakdown of a collective consciousness, resulting in collective amnesia, collective guilt, collective denial. The loss of an effective, ideal telepathic communicational system. We have vestiges of telepathy that are active in our world today, but the vestiges are so unusual that we have a hard time really coming to any solid conclusions about it. The sudden communicational isolation of the individual. Possibly the loss of communication with or the control of higher animal life forms. It's one thing to live with lions and elephants and maybe even dinosaurs when you can control them. And it's another thing to live with them when you have no control over them. The sudden need to develop or greatly expand verbal sound symbol language and phonetic alphabets. The sudden onset of psychological pathologies, that is, schizophrenia, autism, bipolar depression, and manic expression, psychoses, neuroses, phobias. The development of psychotic systems of thinking. The loss of effective or productive brain-mind bicamerality. The development of arcane systems for inducing trances, dampening self-consciousness and behavior to regain the connection, such as prophecy, oracles, familiar spirits. Idolatry was probably always a form of altered consciousness focus. Probably using mind focus, white noise, self-hypnosis, focus on very, very powerful symbols that represented the devastation and the catastrophe to mankind. The gradual development or redevelopment of greater self-consciousness as we know it. There's significant evidence that the form of self-consciousness that we take for granted today just reemerged a few hundred years ago. Some kind of morphic resonance carry forward that our subconscious or bicameral mind taps into, possibly supported by what I call the Sheldrake-Thornhill morphogenetic resonance field concepts, or possibly supported by the holographic universe paradigm, record supported. Possibly some other inheritance type mechanism. Major factor number 17, development of organizations as top-down, hierarchical, authoritarian, coercive, including majority rule equals central ruler, as above, so below. By the way, everybody should look down at this point and notice the big, bold, nested circular patterns on the carpet. That's a carry forward of what I'm talking about. Kings, presidents, bureaucracies, chief executive officers versus bottom-up networking, voluntary mutual agreement, familial type support in endeavors, which have sub-aspects of regulation, planning of multitudinous individual economic activities. Here, herding cats, versus decentralized economic activity, the invisible hand or emergent order of the price system without interference, regulation, obstruction from government. An explosion of civilizations with city-states, many ancient ones up until today centered around a civic or business or city hall hub. Development of social classes by wealth, race, ancestry, equaling some kind of special descent from the gods. Development of competitive sports, most probably from initially sacred ball planet games. 20, an explosion of monument building with an inordinate percentage of gross productivity devoted to it. Whole cultures devoted any excess productivity and capability into just building monuments, pyramids, for instance. In Chaco Canyon, people labored under harsh conditions for 800 years building weird, unusable buildings. And then at some point set fire to the roofs of them and left. What was that all about? Well, most probably some charismatic leader had a vision that if we do this, the gods will return or will re-enter the golden age. We'll recover all that we had back when, that we lost. 21, the development of technology. We've developed a need-based technology to deal with the new exigencies. We've developed a replacement-based technology to deal with what was lost. For instance, now we have cell phones, computers, the World Wide Web. We can have pretty much instantaneous communication, one-to-one, one-to-many, via cell phone or the internet. We no doubt went through a rapid march from the Stone Age to the Copper Age to the Bronze Age and so on, up to whatever the latest age is. Information age, technological age, I don't know. 22, the stark bias of survival or survivor religious testimony. When there's going to be a catastrophe delivered from the sky and there's not a blessed thing you can do about it, except maybe get under a pyramid or in a heavy cave, and people do things that they think is going to help them survive, or they get drunk and hope they wake up alive, okay? And if they don't know about it, and so on. some people crawl off and try to have one last glorious romantic session, whatever. The point is that only the survivors get to tell what they did and claim that that helped them to survive. The people that did the same exact thing aren't around anymore to say, wait a minute, I did that and it didn't do anything. '23, the development of formal religions, the major part of which is always an explanation of what went wrong, along with an explanation of how to fix it or induce God to fix it, and then a whole variety of coping mechanisms. 24, the development of holy days, or now we use the word holiday, Sabbaths and other holy days, periods, the Roman Saturnalia, the Greek Chronia. These were pretty much identical, the latter two. And of course, dedicated to the great god, planet Saturn. Holy days have now morphed into Western culture, particularly into secular holidays like New Year's Day, where we do a dim reenaction of the catastrophe. Fireworks, lots of noise, celebrating the dawning of a new age, and always with the dropping of the great glowing ball down the side of the building in New York, okay? That was Mars, by the way. 25, the acceptance of formations in the sky, primarily involving Saturn, Mars, and Venus with their plasma discharges, actually inaugurated the world's major religious symbols, such as the Ankh, the cross, the Celtic cross, the yin-yang, the star, moon, and crescent, etc. 26, the development of ritual, the institution of God-ordained rites, ceremonies, chants, etc. A focus of concentration or worship on idols and or sacred icons, leading from mild to severe altered states of consciousness. The development of sacrifices, strictures, ordinances, and sacraments to help God love or feel better toward us. 27, the development of clans, tribes, and tribal warfare. 28, the ultimate development of celestial, magical, or exotic living entities. For instance, hierarchies of angels, demons and devils, ifrits, jinns and genies, fairies, leprechauns, elves, goblins, ghouls, witches, etc. 29, construction and architectural developments. The inauguration of a monolithic monument building technology. Stone mason. There was a lot of science and art and knowledge and learning that went into all of that. Maybe even things that we have lost today. It's still unknown how they move such massive stones, such distances, and across rivers and so on. The development of architectural elements from basically the stupa, which Tony Peratt showed us was an upside-down model of the polar configuration. A golden dome at the bottom with a pyramidic pillar leading up to a reddish ball with a pillar pyramidic pillar leading up to a bluish-greenish ball from the Golden Dome, and then another one leading up to a reddish ball, which was the view that one had of the polar configuration from Earth. And there were attendant domes and pillars, spiras, cupulas, nested circle layouts, etc. The inordinate time and attention to producing petrographs and petroglyphs. You can't just go out and in a half an hour with a stone make a nice petroglyph. It may take a month to do any such thing as that. And Peratt showed us that the petroglyph or graph makers had to be protected from radiation from the southern polar region while they were doing that. Again, estimated that it took months under harmful conditions to produce many of these. So, the mythological mindset. Has modern man overcome the mythological mindset, or has modern man just gone through an extended period of forgetting and burying knowledge of what really happened in the ancient times? Can we be more intellectually responsible in our belief systems? That's the question I leave you with. Thank you.